Welcome to the Reading the World Conversation Series. We're honored to have Horacio Castellanos Moya with us today. Before I introduce him, I would like to thank the College of Arts and Sciences, National Endowment for the Arts, and New York State Council for the Arts for supporting the series. Without them, we wouldn't be able to bring these amazing authors here to Rochester. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that we have our third event of the Reading the World Conversation Series coming up on the 26th of April. And what we're doing is we're having a celebration of open letter. And we're going to have 10 readers from the university, including Dean Susan Gibbons, Joanna Scott, who's here, Claudia Schaefer, and Dean Joanna Olmsted and others, read little selections from our books, just to give people an idea of what it is that we're up to and kind of the breadth and the depth of what it is that we publish here at Open Letter. Horacio Castellanos Moya was born in Honduras, raised in El Salvador, and has since lived in Mexico, Costa Rica, Canada, Guatemala, Spain, and Frankfurt, Germany. He's a journalist and the author of 8 novels, 3 of which are in the back. If you're curious, She Devil in the Mirror, Dances with Snakes, and Senselessness. And I'm sure you'd be happy to sign one for you as well if you pick one up. He's published in the U.S. by the excellent New Directions Press. From 2006 to 2008, he was a writer-in-residence at the City of Asylum program in Pittsburgh, where he still lives. And in his 2008 novel, Senselessness, was a finalist for the Best Translated Book Award. And it was my personal favorite, didn't win, but it was close. And he'll be talking with Chad Post, who's the director of Open Letter Books. So please join me in welcoming Horacio Castellanos Moya.
It was through her that we learned of his daily routine. He'd leave the car at 10 in the morning, wander off to some unknown part of the city, and somewhere between 8 and 10 at night, he'd come back carrying a canvas bag full of trash and shut himself up in the car until the next day. I was the ideal neighbor to snoop on this individual. Unemployed and without any real hope of finding a decent job in these new and troubled times, I was living in the apartment of my younger sister Adriana and her husband Damian. Every month, as a symbolic gesture, I gave them some of the money sent to me from the United States by my older sister Manuela, the one who raised me up, the one who loved me the most. My situation was very difficult. My degree in sociology, a major no longer offered by most universities, wasn't helping me find a job. And there were too many teachers around. Companies didn't need sociologists, and a career in politics, the only other field in which I could have applied my knowledge, was a profession alien to my abilities. I spent most of my time in the apartment, watching television and reading the newspaper. I still hope that one day I'd find a classified ad that will change the course of my life. I also help Adriana run errands, and once in a while, when the opportunity presented itself, I would go see one of those solemn types who, after looking at my resume, would ask me to give them a call that was never answered. I first met the man in the yellow Chevrolet on my way to the store for some cigarettes. He was getting out of the car, holding his canvas bag. He wore jeans that had once been blue, grubby running shoes laced up with string, and a tattered t-shirt. His belt looked like a snake. I politely said hello. He didn't answer. Instead, he shut the car door and leaned down the street, sullen and reeking of alcohol and urine. "He's a disgusting drunk," said Mia Beatriz, a plump older woman with a sharp tongue, but she looked for a pack of cigarettes. "He doesn't talk to anyone. Who knows how he ended up here? We should do something to get rid of him." I talked about him with my sister and brother-in-law at dinner. He didn't look like any ordinary beggar, but seemed to have once been a middle-class sort of person. I thought the Chevrolet might really belong to him. My brother-in-law had never seen him, but he had seen the car and wondered whether it still worked. "He got here somehow," Adriana said. It's been here less than 2 weeks. When I told them about the snake around his waist, I was met with their usual unbelieving stares. A few days later, I ran into him again, this time at night. He was coming back to the car with his canvas bag loaded with what I assumed was trash. I caught up to him, said, "Good evening," and started to walk beside him. "I'm Eduardo Sosa, your neighbor," I said. He didn't turn around to look at me, but kept walking as though I never spoken to him, as though I weren't even standing next to him. I continued, "Living in a car must be pretty uncomfortable." He gave off the same rancid stink, and he was moving his lips, muttering to himself. I kept walking beside him. I already had a coffee. There wasn't a movie worth watching on TV that night, and he piqued my curiosity. He wasn't wearing the snake belt. "The neighbors are complaining about you. They are going to call the authorities to come and take you away." He was less than social. He looked at me with contempt and blurted, "What's it to you? Why are you sticking your nose in? Go away. Leave me alone."
Thank you for reading that. And I do want to mention that book, Dance with Snakes, was published by Biblioasis, a publisher in Windsor that helped set up this whole event. So I want to thank them too for doing that. And I'm going to sort of ruin the story of Dance with Snakes for everyone who hasn't read it yet to some degree, and say that what happens after that moment, after Sosa meets the owner of the yellow Chevrolet, that he ends up killing him, and then essentially takes over his life, and goes and lives in the yellow Chevrolet and finds that there's 4 snakes in there, and then goes on like a reign of terror, essentially, is how I would describe it, where he goes to the shopping mall first, if I remember right, and like the snakes go out and murder a bunch of people, and he literally terrorizes the city. And there's a number of different viewpoints to this. There's different like media representations of how this guy terrorizes it. And then at the end of the book, after living this whole life of this reign of terror, he goes back to his own ordinary life, like he impersonated this person. And one of the things that struck me about this book, especially in relation to your earlier books, is like how political it sort of is. That this character is able to adopt this identity and like attack the things that were bothering him about the society in which he lives, and then kind of get away with it. And when I was preparing for this interview, I looked up a lot of reviews, a lot of pieces on your work, and what came up over and over again is how people would refer to you as being a political writer, which I know that you don't like, right?
Well, I don't like many things.
Which I completely understand. And I want to say that, like right here, that right now, that I don't think of you as a political writer in a lot of ways. That having read the 3 books I've been translated into English, I would never categorize you that way. But these early books, like that one, seems to have like a real political edge to it. But more importantly, there's your first novel, La Diaspora, which hasn't been translated in English, but sounds very interesting. I was wondering if you could talk a minute about what that book was and like what the context was in which it was written.
La Diaspora, that was my first novel. So I wrote that novel in 1986, 1987, and then it was published. I sent the novel, it was my first novel, so I was very doubting. I was doubting a lot about how this novel was, and then in the middle of the Civil War, this kind of surrealistic situations that we have in Latin America, in the middle of a civil war, a very intense civil wars in El Salvador, the Jesuit University, UCA, University of Central America, that was run by this bright Jesuit at the time, convoked for a national prize of novel, right? And no one was writing novels. Why? Because in a civil war, everybody is just killing other people, right? You don't have time to write novels. So, and I was living in Mexico, and I had this novel, and I said, I will send this novel. And I sent the novel. And the novel was based on some of my